The Batman, the review by The Us. It's finally here. If you add the in front of everything, it just makes it more epic, prestigious.
Dramatic.
Yes, official. You know, if you are getting a call from an insurance company or the insurance company, who are you more likely to give your details to so they can defraud you?
I mean, look at Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad.
Exactly, and one of them's better, so.
That's true.
Now, we are talking The Batman today. Spoilers, we did do a spoiler-free review before, so if you haven't seen that or somehow you are visually impaired and you clicked the spoiler one and you don't want them, please get out of here. I don't want to hear complaints about that, so let's hop into it. I gotta be honest with you, just straight off the bat, this movie is my favorite live-action Batman movie. We talked about that in the spoiler-free section, and Jill, you're here today to kind of share your thoughts on this as well. We watched Batman 89 right before this, a movie that I love, but is not really anything like comic book Batman.
I will say, though, that Batman movie, Batman 89, before I watched this, was my favorite Batman movie.
Yeah, so we both come at this from, I guess, a unique perspective. Doesn't make us special or anything, but neither of us is the hugest fan of the Nolan movies. I mean, we both like them a lot. I think they are fantastic movies, but just like something like Batman 89 or Batman Returns, I think that those movies are really good movies, but a weird adaptation of Batman. And I do think those two things can be different. Like The Dark Knight, peak cinema, amazing. It's a great movie, but as a Batman movie, it's not as much for me, okay? And
Yeah.
I think it's okay to recognize that. This movie, it scratches both itches for me. You know, it is the cinema feeling of The Dark Knight, of the Nolan movies, without the camp of previous Batman incarnations, but still the soul of Bruce Wayne and the soul of who this character is on the page, which I think is really fun to see.
It was very much so comic book Batman. You know, like dark, and just very, you know, like that feeling of like kind of gothic aesthetic where there's Batman, he doesn't really like talk much, but you know he's thinking a lot because he's like really stoic and handsome and you just want to like throw him down on a bed.
No, I don't. I don't know that, but I did feel that looking at Catwoman in this, so
That makes sense.
I understand what you're saying. I think one of the things I love about this movie the most is that from right out the gate, it's not afraid that it is a comic book movie. And what I mean by that is, yes, it is modernized for, I guess you would say, you know, both casual moviegoers and modern audiences and comic book fans alike, but they are immediately banking on that imagery of being Batman. So, for example, they pretty much start out with Batman's monologue with, when the light hits the sky, it's a warning. You know, it's not just a call for Batman to come help. This is also something that makes people terrified of him. And right off the bat, I could buy that people were terrified of the Robert Pattinson Batman, which is something I really like. I think one of your favorite scenes is the very opening of this movie.
Yeah, it is actually my one of my favorite scenes is the opening because there are these parts where there's these thugs who are doing bad things, you know, just like they do, and they look in the shadows while Robert Pattinson is talking, and they think that Batman is there, even if he isn't, and they just get terrified and completely stop what they're doing and run because they saw the light in the sky, and it's literally the best thing ever.
Yeah, I really like how, he talks about it's a warning, and also how he talks about, though, he can't be everywhere at once, so he almost uses the mythology of, you don't know when this guy is going to pop up and beat the ever-living crap out of you as like a deterrent, as a crime deterrent. Obviously, crime is up at the beginning of this movie, so there's a lot of people who are willing to just do it anyway and risk not getting, attacked by Batman or whatever. But it kind of shows that impact that he has on individual people, which I think is really interesting because the point of this review is not to pit it against other Batman movies. That's not really the point. But I do think that this movie probably does the best job of showing us individual glimpses of how Batman affects people, both positively and negatively, throughout the entire movie. I mean, we see that from the beginning scene, the opening, like you said, to the end. And I also really like just who he is in this movie. I mean, I know a lot of people have this argument online of like, well, Bruce Wayne is the mask, Batman is who he really is, or like, no, 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 he's Bruce Wayne underneath. This movie does a really good job of talking about both. I mean, this is a Bruce Wayne who is ignoring Bruce Wayne because he's not very interested in his personal life in this, and he's very much banking on being Batman, but throughout the course of the movie, learning that being Batman is not just being Batman, it's also being Bruce Wayne, you know? The fact that when he went out and talked to people, it affected them. There were people interested in him and knowing that he could make a difference, you know, as Bruce, and seeing this recluse, and also in costume, seeing that he could give certain people hope instead of just scaring their pants off.
Yeah. And it honestly, this movie gave me really big Arkham video game vibes. Like, I know we've talked about Arkham a lot on this channel, and you guys are probably like getting wet right now at the thought of it.
I am, certainly, but I started wet.
But like, this movie very much so captured everything that I loved about the Arkham games, with like the fear, the just being very close to the comics Batman, you know, not killing anyone and having a romance with Catwoman, because I am in love with Catwoman and I would literally marry her. And I loved the inclusion of Riddler, and how, even though he wasn't like Arkham Riddler and he wasn't like other iterations of Riddler we've seen, he was very much so still a threat and still very Ridley, if that makes sense. Like, he had a bunch of riddles that were pretty funny.
Yeah, I liked that he was his own thing. That's probably the most unlike the comics thing. I think you and I have talked about this. My opinion on comic book adaptations is a little bit unpopular.
Mm-hmm.
If I connect with the movie, I don't care how accurate it is to the comic or not.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. You know, so something like The Dark Knight, I mean, everybody will say that the comic book adaptation has to be accurate to the comic. Those movies aren't, really. They're kind of just their own thing, using Batman imagery and the soul of it to insert that mythology into modern day. This movie's a mixture, you know?
Yeah,
Batman
definitely.
and Catwoman are very much like comics versions.
Yeah.
Riddler is not at all. And so they kind of mix those two approaches, and I think that they get the best of both worlds out of it. You know, I could tell watching this that people who helped write and work on this knew previous Batman stories.
Yeah.
Even something like Batman Telltale, you could see the influence for that here.
You can also tell that the writing was kind of clever. I mean, at least I thought it was clever when they had Riddler do this riddle about a thumb drive, and you literally had to use the severed thumb of a dude.
Well, that's why I don't get when people say this movie needed more levity and stuff. Like, I understand that. I like the MCU. We both like the MCU. We own every movie except for the Eternals, because I just haven't bothered to spend the money yet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Background. I think the MCU has kind of fried some people's expectations of movies that have a superhero or vigilante in them, that they need to pause for levity and have funny jokes and stuff like that. The levity found in this movie is more in personal interactions. Things like interactions between, you know, Bruce and Selina. Things like interactions between Bruce and Gordon. Those are where the levity and the comedy is found. Even things like Colin Farrell, his Penguin's introduction with something like, "Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart," and stuff like that, and his jokes in the club room and stuff with Batman, where he's kind of snooty towards him, or things where you see Gordon calling Batman Chief, you know, and stuff like that, and kind of sticking up for him, and they have a legitimate friendship that you can see over the course of the movie. Not only are those things that are given depth that we haven't seen as much of in live-action Batman. I think the Nolan movies did the best job with a Bruce-Gordon friendship before this, actually showing that on screen. But also, they added that levity. They added a little bit of fun and funniness to this movie. And I think that it's kind of weird to me people missed that, you know?
I also think that, you know, a lot of movies have this problem where they add too many villains in, and then it kind of gets lost. In this movie, you had Carmine Falcone, you had Penguin, you had Riddler, who was the main dude, and I thought they included all of them in such a fantastic way, and I'm so happy that they, like, showed off the Iceberg Lounge, too, and, like, all of the people who you wouldn't think were doing bad things being there. It was, I don't know, it was just very fun, and I loved that they had Selina be a worker there and have her walk around there, and you see the inside of the Iceberg Lounge and, like, the downstairs of it.
Yeah, I think this is, again, it's up there for really showing the corruption of Gotham officials
It was really good.
and how that actually ties into it. A lot of times they'll tell you that kind of stuff in Batman, but you won't see it quite as much. This movie did a very good job of giving you street level Bruce view of what's going on too. I
Mhm.
also really like those scenes where he's going around not in costume and you kind of see how he gets from place to place, where like sometimes he goes in just dressed like a homeless guy, basically like a psycho,
Mhm.
and then he'll like change into the Batman costume, you
Mhm.
know, inside where he's going.
Yeah.
So I thought things like that were interesting because it shows a Batman who, yes, he has money and yes, he has skill, but he can't fight everyone. I mean, we even see that at the end of the movie where he's fighting all of these different Riddler goons, and there is a point where he's overpowered. That works very well for this time period of Batman. This is basically year 2 Batman. He hasn't been around that long, but he's been around long enough to make a difference, but he doesn't suck. You know,
Mhm.
the year 1 Batman, as fun as it is kind of a train wreck usually. He's a guy who gets his butt kicked occasionally or almost dies. This Batman is experienced enough to avoid a lot of that and be scary, but also be very vulnerable at different points.
I also thought Robert Pattinson did such an incredible job, like fulfilling all of these needs. Like he is literally like before I feel like a lot of people just thought of him as the Twilight dude, like whatever, like not the best actor ever. In this movie, he is one of the best actors I've ever seen. And like I'm not kidding about that. Like I absolutely loved his performance. I want more of him. I want to marry him. I want him in our house. And Robert Pattinson, if you're listening,
That sounds like slavery. Dangerously close.
no, no, no. Robert Pattinson, if you're listening, I love you, and if I'm ever dying of cancer, I want you to come to my bed.
Well, what about me?
You can come, you can be there too, but like if I'm gonna have like a make a
Okay, got it.
wish,
Yeah.
I want Robert Pattinson there.
Okay, got it. Every day of my life is basically a make-a-wish, so
Yeah.
but without the wish.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna say the same for Zoe Kravitz. You know, this is like the unsung star of this movie to me.
Yeah.
Zoe Kravitz is incredible. This is someone I never actually watched in a movie before, other than she was in Lego Batman.
Oh, really? I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
she played Catwoman's voice in that
Oh,
actually,
that's really funny.
which is funny. And douchily, she was told that she was too urban looking to play to play Catwoman in the Nolan movies.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm
That's
not.
kind of racist.
Yeah,
Actually.
it's not very good.
And then look at her hair, like being beautiful, looking like which iteration of Catwoman did you say was the one you thought she looked like?
Well, I think that she reminds me a lot of the way Frank Miller did
Yeah,
Catwoman, like
yeah.
in year 1 and stuff, but that's me. I know that Catwoman has had a back and forth in terms of she's usually portrayed as just white, but sometimes she is a somewhat white, somewhat black girl. I don't really know what the word for this is now. I guess is mixed offensive. I don't think it is.
I don't think mixed is offensive, but
Okay,
I mean, we'll
well-
probably get educated in the comments. So.
It can't be worse than the people thinking they were changing the world by informing us what the Rainbow High hairstyle
No,
actually
it was Barbie. It
Oh,
was Barbie.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we said it was dreads, and they were like, actually, it's micro braids.
You said it was dreads, and people told me to educate my wife, which I thought was misogynist.
Yes, they did tell you to educate
It's
your
crazy
wife.
how people who get offended are very offensive. Anyways, one of the things I loved about this movie though was Zoe. You know, like she embodied who Catwoman was to me. By the way, I'm just gonna say, Catwoman in the Arkham games is hot as hell, obviously,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like everybody wants to, you know, do the deed.
I kind of
Listen,
thought Zoe was hotter.
yes, and that's what I'm getting to, though, by the way, is that Catwoman in the Arkham games, one of my issues with her, and one of my issues with those Arkham games in general, is that they get the surface level very good.
Mhm.
Very, very good. Like, in costume stuff, fantastic. But who is Selina under the mask? Who is Bruce under the mask? They
Mhm.
don't do enough of that.
Mhm.
And I actually feel that way about a lot of representations of this character. I think that, you know, going back through those movies, ironically, I think movies like 89 and Batman Forever, believe it or not, or even, I don't know, even in Batman v Superman, where you see a lot of Bruce, those movies do a pretty good job of, like, talking about Bruce.
Yeah.
But I would say just as often as not, the movies do a not good job with the Bruce persona or with the people under the mask and humanizing them. A lot of times it's like superheroes are cool. Show them as the superhero. This movie did great with both of those characters, Selena and Bruce. Like, it's not just she's a hot as hell, girl that you want to like freaking whip the crap out of you and tie you to your bed with her cat toys and stuff like that. It's not just that. It's also like, this is a human being who you understand her interests. She was cheated by Falcone. She was, beaten down in basically this foster type system. She was basically, she should have had an amazing life and had a really shit one.
Mm-hmm.
You see why she feels the way she does, why she talks the way she does. It's even worth mentioning, a lot of people got absolutely triggered about the line that she said about like privileged white assholes like running Gotham. But it's like, dude, she's literally like, you can't understand why she would feel that way. Like, you can't see this woman who her father never acknowledged who she was really, who, let's be honest, he is a white privileged asshole. Like, I don't like that language either, but like, let's just look at it. She is. And then, she's ignored by him. Her mom dies.
And she basically had to grow up to like work as like a waitress / stripper type thing in the Iceberg Lounge.
Place.
Yeah. To make money because he wouldn't give her money.
Right. I guess it's like Penguin or Cobblepot and her dad's place, but yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, she is basically pushed into the life she's in, both the life of stealing and the life of, servitude in a way. Because
Falcone only trusts her as far as he can throw her and only wants to use her to further himself when he can.
Right, and he doesn't really acknowledge or care about her existence on a personal level. I think that it's interesting because you can tell that Falcone cares and knows kind of who she is in the way she talks to him, but also he's surprised when she just straight up says, like, I'm your daughter near the end of the movie, too. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, like, up for debate if he knew that before. I kind of think he sort of did. Mm-hmm. I think he knew that she looked like her mom, and I think he had a pretty dang good idea, but didn't ever want to officially acknowledge it, right? Yeah. And what I'm getting at is, you throw this woman into this city where all these people are abusing their power, killing people. Even the Maroni drug bust was basically a fraud. Yeah. All this stuff, and you can't understand why that one line is in the movie. Like, it's not like a pervasive theme that goes throughout this movie. I would argue this movie is pretty apolitical. Like, the most political stuff it talks about is people abusing their power and being asshats.
Even if she was white, I would see her using that line too, just because it kind of shows how she feels about all of these old men who don't really come from any different backgrounds or understand anything that, like, even poor people have been through.
Right. It's more about that than about skin color.
Yeah. It's not like her being like, oh, by the way, a skin color means everything to everyone.
Yeah, I hate white people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were people doubling down and stuff like that on social media about that. And it's like, dude, I genuinely feel bad for you if that is what pulled you out of the movie. Because, like, there is a line where things get too political, and then there is a line where it's, like, about empathy and about understanding how a character feels. Like, I truly believe the characters that are fleshed out on purpose, Alfred, Selena, Bruce, Gordon, characters like that, even Riddler, you understand their motivations, which is something that so many movies and stories struggle with.
I know, and I love that. I absolutely loved that I could understand absolutely everything that these people were thinking and going through their mind. It reminded me a lot of, like, Matrix and how it's very interconnected and has a lot of storylines going on that you can just, I don't know, like, think about for longer than just watching the movie for. Yeah. I really enjoy movies like this, and this is probably going to be one of my favorite movies ever.
I wanted to talk to you about Riddler, too. Mm-hmm. We touched on Riddler a little bit here. Riddler is one of those characters who is really interesting in this movie because he is not at all comic book, like we said, but also you completely understand him. He works very well. He's sort of a marriage of ideas between the comics Riddler, like his intelligence, all the stuff he does, and inspirations of the Zodiac Killer in real life with the ciphers and all this other symbolism that he did, and also the dangers of giving anyone a voice, which is kind of interesting because you find out partway through the movie that Riddler has been sort of cultivating a cult online and sort of getting these people to help him with what he's doing. Because there are questions throughout the movie of, like, how could this guy set all this up, and how could this guy be all these places at once, almost that kind of thing. And even though we don't see anyone helping him earlier on, it's very plausible that somebody did help him earlier on in the movie, just like people helped him later on in his final scheme. And I think that the way that works is really interesting because it establishes what the Arkham games never did, or what, I don't know, what Batman Forever never tried to do. Because Batman Forever, he mainly works by himself with Two-Face, and then in all the Arkham games, he's always with all these henchmen. But it's like, how did he build up this following? How do you get this many people to help him? How are there so many people corrupt that are willing to help Riddler? It shows you.
And pretty much it shows that Riddler was like streaming like on the dark web, and you wouldn't think that having 500 subscribers would be a lot, but when you're on a place like that and everybody's a psychopath, 500 people is a lot.
Right, and worth pointing out, not everyone on the dark web's a psychopath, but like everyone who followed Riddler certainly was.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because it was a modernization of that character in a way, but it didn't bother me. I don't like when characters are butchered. I guess that's what I'll say. Like, if I can't see the soul of the character there, I don't like it. One of my favorite things about the multiverse, okay, and I know it's become a bit of a cop-out for some writers, but the multiverse of DC and Marvel is you can have a Batman who has the soul of Batman, like, for example, the soul of that character, but he cannot be right off the page. Robert Pattinson does that very well. Yes, his costume is a little different. His attitude at times is a little different, but you can tell he is Batman. And I know people don't feel that way about a lot of the adaptations because they're not comics accurate before this, but I often felt like that with Batman himself in the Batman movies. The thing with this movie that I thought it did really well was that for everyone. Gordon was Gordon. Riddler was Riddler. But they weren't the same exact person as in the comics or as in a different movie.
And you know what? This actually gave me a lot of hope for them bringing in a Batgirl in this universe. Because of Gordon and his inclusion, I was kind of hoping, like, they might bring in a Barbara at some point.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they do that, since the Batgirl we know of is going to be in the main DCEU. But now that Gordon is here and, Bruce is here and they obviously have an established friendship, it does leave the door open. Like, will there be a Robin? Will there be a Batgirl in the future? I know they plan... I think the idea is 3 movies, but there's so many different spin-off things already in the works or being pitched. And also, it's worth mentioning that there is the whole fact that Robert Pattinson said he wants to play this character as long as the studio will have him. And as long as Matt Reeves wants to make movies and stuff like that. They basically said that...
I think we're getting more than 3 movies,
I think Robert Pattinson wants to do more than 3 movies. Yeah. I don't know why you wouldn't as WB. This...
is a moneymaker.
It's killing it in the box office. And I think that it's sort of a best of both worlds for everyone. I understand that there are going to be people who are not interested in the movie because they are off-put by previous decisions from the studio. Things with like how they treated Zack Snyder, whether you like him or not, it was not good, with the situation with his daughter and everything, or situations with like Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck and all this stuff where people have been on again, off again for years. I get that some people are going to have those problems and not want to watch the movie. They probably haven't made it here either, but I think it's important to watch this stuff when it's good. Like if your whole thing is, I don't want to support these things because they're not good, this is a really good movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think like a big thing you should be doing is supporting somebody like Matt Reeves, who has such an incredible vision for these things. He very much so reminds me of how Tim Burton makes his movies, with like that dark undertone and these like very intentional shots. And I really want somebody who has such good talent to be like pushed further in their career, I guess. Like even if he's working with WB, like WB isn't like the worst company in the world. They're also not the best company in the world. But like when they make something incredible like this, it should be supported. Like both of us loved this movie so much that we literally stood outside the theater for like 15 minutes and took a survey on how much we loved it.
Yeah, we took the exit survey that they were doing. And I think too, movies like this, movies like Joker, those movies show you what superhero movies or vigilante movies or whatever can be. The quality that they can be.
And should be.
When someone cares. This is not like a dig at it particularly, but the budget for I was reading online, and sorry if it's not exactly 100% right, but I was reading online that the budget for this movie and the budget for Black Widow were fairly similar in scope. And this movie has an extremely unique identity. It knows what it is, it knows what it's trying to do. It's not trying to please absolutely everybody, but it is trying to please anyone who's a fan of this character. And it could also bring in new fans of the character. It takes it seriously, it takes it to heart, and it does a great job. And then a movie like that it's fine. It's not
Black
bad.
Widow, you mean?
Yeah, for Black Widow, it's not bad. Like I think it would be disingenuous to say it's a piece of shit or anything.
It's mid.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of sad to see that complacency in some of these movies when you see these other movies that are almost art house films. I know that sounds douchey, but things like Joker and this, they show you what those films are capable of. Even the Suicide Squad, I know a lot of people didn't watch it, but that movie, it has a very clear, distinct identity.
And it's really good.
It knows what it is, and James Gunn knows what he was trying to do. It's not trying to be cookie cutter in any way. I like this a lot. It reminds me of the approach of like Logan or Deadpool 1 or 2. It's just unique.
I just want to see more of these directors making more of these WB films. Like, I want more James Gunn. I want more Matt Reeves. I love the both of them to death because of their movies. And, like, this movie in particular, for me, was like The Matrix, where I want to go see it again. You know? Like, I'm willing to watch it multiple times in a short span of time because I loved it so much. And, like, we went to one theater too, and we decided that we didn't like the seats and the food enough to have a good enough experience there for a movie we knew we were both gonna love, that we decided to go to a different theater because we wanted the experience to be so top tier because we were so excited for this movie.
Yeah, we had to pay twice.
Yeah.
It was kind of annoying. But I love this movie. I do have a couple more things to talk about very briefly. One is the cinematography. This movie is beautiful. The shots are incredible. It's very much like it. The imagery from '89 is fantastic. I love it. I love the gothic imagery. However, the cinematography is limited a little bit by its time and by the effects that they had availability of. Then you get to things like The Dark Knight, where you have insane cinematography and shots and all this cool story, but the action's okay. Like, I really think the action's fine in those. And then you get to something like Batman v Superman and Justice League, where Batman is just kicking ass and things look like they're pulled from comic panels themselves, but it sometimes lacks certain depth people wanted it to have, and it didn't build up to, Batman killing. What I'm getting at is this has like the best parts of every iteration of live action Batman, whether it's the best action, the best cinematography. It kind of pulls those elements in. You can tell that this is a film. It's not like a high budget YouTube video or a cash in mid movie. It's something that, like I said, it's very distinct. It has an identity, but also it's able to learn from the successes and failures of every previous live action iteration of these characters.
And it builds on these characters too. It's not just you watch this and Batman's like already like super established and you don't know anything about him throughout the entire movie. Like, he's still kind of established, but you learn so much about this character in the movies that like we didn't get enough of with Ben Affleck.
And one of my favorite scenes is him escaping the police department, where Gordon has to help him. But just that interaction, those interactions with those characters, I think, are what sold this movie for me. Seeing that those two are friends and how they talk to each other and seeing them solve riddles and stuff like that, and even seeing his relationship develop with Alfred. He is an asshole to Alfred at the beginning of this movie, and by the end, kind of showing him that he cares about him, and without saying it, kind of saying like, well, you are kind of my dad, in a way, like, because earlier on in the movie he said like, well, you're not my dad, and Alfred's like, yeah, I'm reminded of that very often, basically, and sort of seeing that they do have that relationship and that Bruce is just in this very angry place in his life, where he operates this way not just because he's angry and because he wants to affect the city, but also he talks about because he is somewhat scared, of like going through that again. And when you see him see himself in other characters like the orphan, who's at the funeral, and you see himself, that's a tongue twister, in that character and kind of that connection. I think that those human moments of this are really good, even leading into the end where he uses the flare to lead people out of the water, or where he stays with the evacuation team to help people in Gotham instead of just bailing, you know, which is something he would have done at the beginning of the movie.
As a closing thought, angry Batman who has a really big heart and can't help himself from helping people. That's my favorite version of Batman, is just like this man who's really angry and damaged, but he cares so much about people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we get in this movie, and I absolutely love every second of it.
I love it too. There's really nothing I walked away from having to excuse.
Yeah.
I think it's the first time in a Batman movie that I don't feel like I have to excuse away elements of it. Like, oh, well, yeah, Keaton kills, but, like, is it really that bad? It was, like, self-defense. And he just found out Joker killed his parents in that version. So, like, you know, or, oh, well, yeah, Nolan's not really that much like the comics, but is it really trying to be? I don't feel like I have to walk away making a justification for the movie about anything.
And that was something I really liked about this movie in particular, is that when Batman found out about Carmine Falcone being pretty much the downfall of his parents, he didn't decide to just go kill him. He wanted him arrested.
Right.
You know, he didn't want that man to die, and he held himself back.
Yeah.
You know, and it was very refreshing.
It was refreshing and still human, because they also show the rage after the adrenaline shot when he sees this guy who's going to kill this woman that he's starting to love, you know, Catwoman, who he's very much enamored with. And this Riddler thug is basically going to kill her. And he takes an adrenaline shot and gets up and he destroys the guy. I mean, if Gordon hadn't pulled him off him, he probably would have accidentally killed him. Not on purpose, but because he's like high on adrenaline. And that happens to soldiers. That happens to people. And people who are given adrenaline shots, it is like an insane, like Hulk rage level drug.
Yeah.
And seeing that too, like you see, no, this guy does have that anger in there.
Yeah.
This guy definitely could kill people and probably is tempted to at times because of how bad it is, but he knows that's not right and he doesn't do that.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to.
Right. It's like, even if deep down he has like that ability to, and maybe sometimes it would be easier because Batman's talked about that in the comics and other stuff before, he doesn't do it on purpose. So to see that too, like the unbridled Batman for a second there and what he's capable of, I think that was incredible too. I love everything. I could talk about this in our half an hour, but I will end it here because it was a long video already.
I do want to mention one last quick thing though. The only thing in this movie that I thought they kind of lacked on was the fact that the new mayor woman who got shot, they kind of just forget about the fact that she got shot and don't mention it again, you know?
Yeah, that's true. But it was already the end of the movie, and I think it was kind of, I thought it was kind of to show like that there are people who are willing to stand up and stuff, but they just get kind of put back down immediately, and it kind of shows why you need Batman. One of the things I like about the movie at the end is people generally accept Batman. Like, he's not seen as a criminal.
Yeah.
I have that issue with previous iterations at times where it's like, yeah, Batman at odds with the police can be fun.
The police don't like him, though, usually. Gordon really is the only one that likes him.
Right, but it also is an issue when you have this guy who's, like, fixing everything in your city and everyone, like, wants him arrested. It doesn't actually make logical sense at a certain point unless they're corrupt cops or corrupt people.
Yeah.
So I think it was good to see normal people having, like, a faith type thing in Batman. They were able to pull that. It's something that I think people don't realize Batman has. You know, they see it in Superman. They see the hope aspect, but Batman can inspire the same thing when he wants to, and he definitely does, especially if you read the comics and how he interacts with kids, as weird as that sounds. He can embody that hope, and this movie, it did a grade A job of it. Like, this is my favorite Batman movie. I love it. The most human relationships, literally, if not the best action that we've seen out of Batman, I think tied for it with Affleck's version of the character. I love it. I can't wait to see more. I'm a little concerned about how many spin-off things they want to do, but we'll see what happens with that. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. What did you think of the Batmobile? I love that thing.
I love the Batmobile, too, and I loved the Bat Cycle.
Everything was great. Please let us know in the comments. We're always interested. Have a fantastic day, everyone. If you did not already subscribe, please do, and leave a like. It helps us out a lot. We do have a secondary channel, Degenerate Plays, where we have played through a lot of games and are playing through more, including some Batman stuff, so we hope to see you there. As always, everyone, stay shway.